started. I want to thank everybody for coming out to Planning and Zoning Commission tonight. We'll start our meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I've asked Commissioner Dayton to lead us in that.
Repeat the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Our first order of business tonight will be the approval of the minutes from the last two meetings. Last month we didn't have them issued, so I hope one of the commissioners had a chance to review those, and I would entertain a motion on accepting those.
I've reviewed those meeting minutes from the last two Planning Commission meetings, and I move that we approve those minutes.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. The first applicant we have tonight is an applicant for zone change. This is the Giles zone change. Looks like Dave's going to address us on that. This is a public hearing, so we'll take public comment after this.
Okay, so the Giles property, it's located there near the intersection of 200 East and Center Street, and currently zoned in the R1, the R19, I believe, R16, and they're proposing to do an infill overlay with a change to the R3 in order to do a duplex on this property. You can see on the site plan, there's some changes to the access onto the property with this proposed development, especially including the existing driveway on the south side. The adjacent property, the structure on the adjacent property has a carport that basically goes right to that property line, and then the driveway extends onto this subject property. So with this, staff wanted to make sure there was good coordination with the applicant and the surrounding property owners to make sure that access and driveway approaches would work with this plan. The one setback difference from what is typically required in the R3 zone, they are proposing a 15-foot rear setback as opposed to a 25-foot setback. There is that existing building behind it, also basically going straight to the property line there. But staff has reviewed this. The units are anticipated to be about 1,500 square feet, with 19 by 19 garages, a full-size driveway. And so staff has evaluated it based on the requirements for the infill overlay, and have taken it to DRC, and they have forwarded a positive recommendation. So we're here to present it here, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
So there are probably quite a lot of properties, or more than just this property, that the surrounding owners have that aren't to code, or like their driveways, they have structures right up to the property line. That's not city code. You know, those kind of things.
Yeah,
typically what happens
in this older central part of town, there's a lot of overlapping property lines or gaps that you can see.
How does that work with code enforcement, or, I mean, like, for, what does that look like?
I mean, it's basically just it would be a dispute between the property owners. So if it was called into question by the property owner and said, hey, look, your building's kind of coming over the property line, then they'd have to work with the surveyor, those type of things. Typically not something the city would get involved, but in this case, because of the application, that definitely comes into play with what their plans are and where they're planning on locating the structure.
Is it the carport itself that's over the property line or just the driveway?
Well, you can see, sorry, if you pull up the Exhibit 2 from the staff report, that big gray area, that's all the existing driveway that's being proposed
Right.
to be removed.
It's clear that the driveway
And
is
then the
over from here.
carport comes basically right to that property line.
But is it on the adjacent property owner's property, or is it actually overhanging into the applicant's property?
It's hard to tell exactly where it is with regards to the property line, but it's you can tell it does denote it on the plan that it's roughly right there where the property line is.
So what's been the conversation with the property owners working out the driveway?
That's something that the applicant might be able to address.
Okay. But I guess my question goes back to the city has city code, and city also has a code enforcement committee, code enforcement. If your property isn't up to code, does somebody come from the city come and knock on your door and say your property's not up to code? Or is it like if your neighbor has a problem with it, then they come and talk to you, you don't want to change it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the situation, but in this case, I think it wasn't really came into question or became an issue until this application was being proposed.
Mr. Mann, can I add, and I just want to make sure that I'm understanding right, we're talking about the carport that is built to the property line. Just because it doesn't meet our current code doesn't mean it's a violation. For decades, Spanish Fork allowed things like carports to be built to property lines, although it's been quite a while since that was permitted. So we are always really hesitant in our office to jump to a conclusion about whether or not something is allowed without doing research that sometimes, because records and evidence is hard to find, it's hard to determine whether something was built out of conformity with the rules that were in place when it was built. So that, I just mentioned that to provide a little more context to maybe this situation. We don't know that just because it doesn't meet the current setback that it was built illegally.
Right, that makes sense, thank you.
So, but on the proposed one, they have their setbacks on the side.
Correct.
They'll have proper setbacks.
Yeah, so you can see the dashed line kind of on the inside of where the property line is that shows the building, the proposed building envelope where they could locate the building based on those setbacks.
They are asking for changes to the back setback.
To the back.
It looks like the
From
duplex has a
25 to
pop
50.
out there in the kitchen or something like that for a dining nook that pushes it back.
Is that, I mean, I'm looking at the rest of the map, that setback, even if it is a change from our regulation, it doesn't seem like it's far off from what other houses in this area are doing. There may be some that are even closer to to the setbacks that are
There
smaller,
could be,
right?
I mean.
The neighbor behind it is to the property line
Yeah.
with a shed or something.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where I was asking too, like, the city doesn't go and say, you gotta move your shed, or do they?
They do.
No.
If it's a new one.
But the existing shed would
The
not.
existing one, they would not.
Unless it was built illegally, and then that happens.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Any other questions for staff? Is the applicant here? Kevin, would you like to come up and address us?
Basically, to answer those questions, we actually some of the things you've discussed is we actually took some of the property to the north. So the original map of this property, we actually had it resurveyed and took a couple of feet to the north to actually give a little bit more buffer from the person to the south that has the carport right there, simply because their overhang was overhanging the property. So we actually resurveyed and took a little bit of property to the north to actually make it work a little bit better.
Do you control both parcels? The one
Yeah.
to the north?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah,
So you basically alleviated the problem for them.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
And with that change, it goes right up to the property line there, their carport.
Their carport does, yeah. Yeah, but from their carport to where the building is, we have a little bit more room by going to the north a little bit more.
Because they own both parcels, they just shifted
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
It's a helpful situation to.
Yeah, no, it's kind of funky. You find these in the old parts of town, and so, I mean, it's like Dave said, you just kind of work with them and try to alleviate the problem. I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that.
That's awesome. I see here that on your plans on this that you'll have an unfinished basement to begin with. Are you planning to build this and then rent those out and then finish the basements as it works?
You know, that's kind of down the road things. Wait and see what happens
Wait
on
and
that.
see. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when I was looking at your floor plan, this is just a silly thing for me to notice, but I noticed your pantry access door is to the hall and not to the kitchen. I was wondering about how come the pantry door didn't go in the kitchen.
You know what? I couldn't answer that question. That would have been the architect.
Anyway, not to tell you have to change
Yeah.
it, but maybe look at it and see.
I like that they actually have the unfinished basement, gives a lot of storage. One of the concerns we hear a lot of times, people don't use their garages for parking, they use it for storage, and having an unfinished basement gives you a big storage area to stow things
Yeah,
in.
we found that on a lot of our other projects. Garages just become a storage unit.
Mhm.
So
That
anything you can do to help alleviate that, I think, makes it better so people aren't parking on the road.
That's nice.
Any other questions for the applicant?
This has been sitting empty for a couple of years now, right?
Yeah,
Because of
there's
the
an old
roof.
house on there, and it
Yeah,
kind of.
I remember the roof was
needed to
bad,
be, yeah, it needed to be torn down.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wasn't that Mayor's old house?
yeah.
Didn't he?
This was Steve's old property.
Yeah,
His-
but
his
he was
family.
raised in that house that got torn down, wasn't
I
he?
think he was.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
This is a public hearing, so we'll open it up to the public. If anybody has any comments on this item, would like to hear your comments. Seeing none, we'll close public hearing. Commissioners, does anybody have any other comments or items we want to discuss on this?
I only have one other comment about the floor plan, and that is, I lived in a duplex once, and we had, and the floor plan has the two bedrooms back to back, and my kids were in the bedroom that was close to the wall with the neighbor, and that was, anyway, if you can hear people through the wall when it's a bedroom, but.
It looks like he's got I don't know how old your duplex was. This one has a modern demising wall that has an air gap and a fire rating between it. It should have a good sound rating.
Oh, good, thanks. It was old. Very old.
If nobody has any more comments, I will entertain a motion, one way or the other.
Well, I'd say we accept the proposed duplex rezoning, or zoning.
Are you making a motion?
I'd make a motion. We accept it
We recommend it?
as presented,
We're recommending.
recommended,
Yeah.
recommend.
Second.
Well, I'm not sure that's
Kind of
there's some findings and conditions that are
Yeah, we'd have to say, make a motion that we recommend the approval of the zoning based on the conditions as lifted in the draft motion,
finding and conditions
findings
and conditions.
and conditions in the motion, draft motion.
Okay.
Second.
I have a second. I have a motion and a second.
Bud?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Our second item of business is the Swenson property zone change. This is also a public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The commission reviewed a proposed annexation a few months ago. subsequent to you recommending that annexation be approved. The council indeed did approve that annexation, and that process has run its course. So the 64, give or take, acres that we're talking about tonight were indeed recently annexed into Spanish Fork. That was the Ray Allen Swenson annexation. At that time, the subject property was designated rural residential, or rather I should maybe say was assigned rural residential zoning. And the applicants are here tonight requesting that the zoning be changed to industrial. Honestly, I don't think there is a lot to provide by way of helpful detail on the proposal or why staff is comfortable tonight recommending that the proposal be approved. There's substantial industrial development happening in the immediate vicinity. And we've talked a little bit earlier tonight about a draft land use element of the general plan and a map that's part of that general plan. And indeed, one of the changes that's been contemplated as we've talked with that draft, we talked about that draft with the Planning Commission and City Council, is indeed designating this area industrial. So largely for those reasons, again, staff recommends that the proposed zone change be approved. I am also going to ask and recommend that if you move tonight to make that recommendation, you strike finding number 3 from staff's recommendation. We largely can provide utility services to the subject property, but at the moment can't provide power. And I think findings 1, 2, and 4 still are very adequate justification for recommending that the proposed zone change be approved, and we hope indeed to have the ability to provide power to the subject property in the relatively near future. But as for tonight, again, we're recommending that the proposed zone change be approved based on findings 1, 2, and 4 that we have in the staff report.
What is the timeline on the power, and what are the obstacles in your way?
Yeah, it'll be a little over a year, I'm told, after we've identified a site for a substation. And we're talking about options for being able to site a substation in the area to provide power. And would like to think that that's not going to hold up development in the area at all. Mm-hmm. But that's a facility that doesn't get built overnight, and we can't start design until we have a site secured. So. Mm-hmm.
Is it holding up other development we've already got designated out there?
Yes. Yep.
So there's other motivating factors pushing it already besides this applicant?
Yeah, I think there are a number of parties that are highly motivated to eliminate. And that really, there's been a substantial investment in the area. The property immediately to the east of this is at least partially developed. And at least for local service, utilities are really at the doorstep of the subject property. We just have a capacity issue, so.
Very good.
Oh, and there's not, I see here, city hasn't received any development applications on this site.
Correct, yep.
Okay. Do we want to hear from the applicant? Is the applicant here? If you don't want to address this, you don't have to either.
I'll address it. Hello, Caden Cole. I'm with the developer. Yeah, there's not much to say here. I think the area is obviously a industrial area, and working heavily with users that want to occupy the spot, and working on the power issue as well with the city and trying to make sure we can provide power. Yeah, we're grateful to be here today. I don't know if you have any questions regarding the property.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
This is a public hearing, so at this time we'll open up to public comment on this topic. Come up and state your name, and so that everybody can hear you. That'd be great.
Sure, my name is Eldon A. Neves. I wanted to assure Dave that I'm not going to be cussing tonight, so I promised my daughter that wouldn't be happening. So I run a bunch of cows, and if you've ever been in the cow business, you know that kind of runs with the cow business, and sometimes it leaks over. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk. I run a ranch with my grass and my equipment and my cattle right directly adjacent to the grassland that's being considered for rezoning. My fence line is directly east of the fence line that is being rezoned, the property being rezoned there by the Swensons. I think that it was Lynn Swenson that has been leasing that land until now, and then Dave has the developers bought this up. I'm not really speaking in hypotheticals right now or prophecy. I'm speaking from my heart and my soul, because the decision is going to land right directly on my fence line. Every April, the Neves generations and friends get together and we have a branding there. It's an all-day event that's heartwarming, and it's even more than that. It's kind of a life-changing procedure with wallowing in the noise and the cattle and the because the boys like to rope and so forth, and it is life-changing. I hope to have this be forever. I'd like to have that land, which is just to the west of this property, be rural forever. And I want to do my best to make a conservation on that. I'm in the process now of that. But let me be very clear. This is all about encroachment. Now, I want you to know that I love Spanish Fork. I was in the last graduating class of the high school before they tore it down in 1962. I have my business here just about 3 blocks to the south, and we've been here for 60 years now. Some of my kids go to school here. I love Spanish Fork. But this is all about encroachment. Encroachment of Spanish Fork City into agricultural land, particularly the community of Palmyra. This is not just a planning mistake. Come on, Dave, don't say anything. It's not just a planning mistake. It is a direct threat to the heritage, the stability, the identity of our community. I won't be very long, I promise. Palmyra is a community, or as a community, has survived these 100 years and more, because it has stayed a farming community while Spanish Fork and other cities have expanded exponentially because of the tax base that they wanted and so forth, without regards to the destruction that their growth causes. There is a line where growth becomes overreach, and we are on that line right now. What is being proposed here is nothing less than the destruction of the rural character and that generations of family have built through hard work, open land, and responsible stewardship. You cannot drop an industrial zone of any kind on a community surrounded by family homes, farms, and pretend that the consequence will be small. Make no mistake, once the disruption has begun, it never stops. The developers have never had enough, never seem to have enough. And I want to address that fairly plainly. The developer who purchased the property wants the zone changed, has no concern, none, for the agriculture community that surrounds it, nor for the people who live on the land, nor for the generational families whose quality of life and livelihood depend on it. The only interest for the purchaser, for the developer, here is profit. The only interest is money for another development. The developer, I think, might claim that he wants to run cattle on the property, but in truth, This is only just a little while before it can be developed as quickly as possible. The developer doesn't live there, used to live there, doesn't live there anymore. But this kind of development has already destroyed much of Palmyra, much of what it was. And people are not too happy with the developer. And I believe that now he tends to extend his tentacles further into the community that currently means nothing to him. He will not live with the consequences. We will, and we do. We are the ones with semi-trucks rattling past our homes. I need to take a little sip here, if it's all right. It'd be much better to have a little glass of water, I know. As a matter of fact, the trucks that rattled past my house, 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, my ceiling fell right down on top of me while I was sleeping there. And of course, you can't say that that was because of the trucks, but I think it was. We are the ones that live with the trucks as they rattle on past. We are the ones who will lose the quiet lives, the quiet nights, and safe roads. We are the ones whose cattle, crops, and values will suffer. We are the ones whose community will be changed forever. Palmyra is not just a spot on the map. Palmyra is not just an open piece of ground to be gobbled up and destroyed forever. Our land is our very way of life. It remains the last bastion, the last piece of sanity against insanity. Palmyra is open fields. It's hard work. When I attend the county commission meetings regularly, was even on the planning commission there for a while. And I used to say, if you want, it's going to be to the point where if you want a piece of footage about farmlands and so forth, you're going to have to go into Sanpete County, and it's almost got to be that point now. Our land remains the last bastion, the last piece of sanity. It is open fields, it's hard work, it's livestock, it's irrigating at 2 a.m. with the mosquitoes and loving it. It's a culture that has endured for more than a century. You cannot pave that over or replace it with warehouses and expect the community and the life of Utah County, of Spanish Fork, and Palmyra to remain the same. Something is forever lost and can be forever lost. Commissioners, you have a responsibility here, not to the developer, who will be gone the moment the last warehouse is sold or leased, the moment the last bit of soil has been paved over. This is the last page. You have the responsibility now to the people who live here, work here, and love this land. I am strongly pleading with you, passionately and with absolute conviction, do not approve this zoning change. Do not allow Spanish Fork to devour the last agriculture community it borders. Do not let the short-term goals of a developer erase the long-term identity of Palmyra. Protect, please, our farms. Protect, please, our homes. Protect your way of life and our way of life. Please protect. When we talk about the fact that, I think Dave mentioned that development is right there. We are right there. Ours is a farm that I want to, ours is a ranch. It's not a farm. I'm a rancher, and I intend to have that ranch remain there forever. Through whatever means I have to do that. We're not part of a development and don't intend to be. And that feeling is felt by everyone of the community of Palmyra. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Is there anybody else that's here to speak on this matter? If you can introduce yourself also, that'd be great.
Hi, good night. My name is Wade Roberts.
And who's with you?
I'm Eldon's grandson. This is his, my daughter. So, as a public works employee, I work for Spanish Fork City. It is interesting to see the process of this. I get to see it every day. I work at the airport, and so I understand the process. I understand there's a way of going about things, but there's also choices, I feel like. There's choices to be made in people's lives. I grew up in Benjamin, so I know Spanish Fork City pretty well. And I feel like I'm digging my roots here. I'm digging my family's roots here. And it's pretty interesting. I just got a hat. It has one of Spanish Fork City's oldest logos on it. I'm sure you're familiar. It has a cow, a sheep, and a horse. And it says Livestock Center of Greater Utah Valley. And I think it's pretty cool to see how Spanish Fork is growing. It's not only little old Spanish Fork that we all know. You go to Stone Drug to get a hamburger. It's growing pretty big. But I think it's important to remember our roots. It's important to remember growing up here in Spanish Fork, and it's important to remember where we come from, the Livestock Center of Utah Valley. And so I just ask that you remember that as me, who's grown up in Spanish Fork and who hopes to raise my family here, that I dig new roots here, and that it's the same Spanish Fork that I've always known. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Seeing nobody else, we'll close public hearing. Thank you. Commissioners, any comments on what we've heard from the staff applicant or the public comments?
When I was looking up this, on the map, it says 48 East South Lane, and when I put it into Google Maps, it was not quite the same place. It didn't show the same place as this. Could you help orient us to where this is? Oh, it's along 77?
Yeah,
Okay.
I saw that. That was inaccurate in there.
Okay.
Seeing that, do you have any questions about what
I'm-
we're talking about?
Yeah, I bet I can see that now.
And I think if you pan out even more, Josh, the subject property abuts State Route 77. That's on the north side of the subject property. If you go north of Spanish Fork to the next interchange, north of our Main Street interchange, the 4 South interchange in Springville and head due west, that's State Route 77, and that
It's close by the airport there now that I see that. Okay. I guess one comment that it's not a question, but a comment was our proposed developer said that that's an industrial area, and that's actually really a transition area currently where you have industrial on one side and agricultural on the other, and so it just depends on how you're looking at it. It is a heritage area. It's also a really good area for light industrial as well. So I can see both sides of that equation.
My comments on, I'd like to add my opinion, a few things that Eldon said. A lot of his comments were on. The landowner that owned that property had it as ag land in the county, amended it or brought it into the city. It is currently zoned RR, so this current landowner has no other rights to it except for RR. That's why they're asking for the zone change today. And that developer is trying to get their highest and best use out of in their eyes, out of the property. which as the landowner, they have every right to do that now. Future land, if the past landowner had wanted to stay ag land, then they probably shouldn't have sold it. So that's where the process starts. It puts everybody in a bad situation is when it's your land, you can do what you want with it as long as you're within the county or city guidelines. This got brought from county into city as rural residential. Now it's before us to see if it can change from RR to match the zoning that's to the east of it, which is I-1. But the sentiment and the comments that were expressed to us are valid comments. And even though that's county land, it is the owner of a property that is adjacent to what we're talking, changing from basically agricultural land into industrial to match the rest of that to the east. And it's very interesting that coincides with comments that this commission has had in several meetings in the past. So, I mean, it's valid comments and things we need to reflect on.
Yeah, and reflecting on this, we're continually going through change in this community, change in all areas here. We obviously look and see what's adjacent here. It's both that we've talked about, the industrial and the rural, agricultural. I have a hard time. I think a lot of us have a hard time with change, but I also recognize property rights. That's kind of a key driving force in a lot that we do here. Obviously, with property rights, we give the ability, and with our property, obviously within regulations and things like that. I appreciate, though, the sentiment that this area is changing, and that is a difficult thing for some who've been there for a long time. So I appreciate those comments as well, and I see that conflict there.
But when you're talking about land rights, this owner has land rights to an RR zoning currently.
I think I have two more things to say. One was today I looked up the municipal code. This is actually being proposed for light industrial, which is different than some other kinds of industrial. So I looked at the uses that they could do there. And there's a long list, both of things that are permitted uses and then conditional uses. And there are quite a lot of permitted uses here that seem to me like they wouldn't be as impactful as others in this property and to property owners. That's one comment. And then my other one is that one thing that we have generally not done is change zoning until, Dave, you tell me if this is right or wrong, until there is a development application. And it feels to me like, since this is an area that is sensitive and there's a lot of feelings around it, I'd rather see a development application, but what's the consequences of that? I'd rather see a development application before considering changing the zoning.
That's a great question, and you're right. And it's typically residential zoning that we're somewhat reluctant to recommend that the council grant until we have a development proposal in front of us. And I think we're close to batting 1,000, going back past many years on requiring a pretty detailed plan for a residential development before we recommend that zoning be changed. We've been more accommodating of proposals for either some type of commercial zone or it's been our light industrial zone without having a development plan. And that's largely been because regardless of how somebody configures a development for some kind of non-residential use, generally speaking, I think we're comfortable with that, and we're not quite as concerned about seeing things before zoning's granted. And that being said, kind of the fundamental also is true that if the commission has any any reservations about what might ultimately exist on the property. And you mentioned that there are a lot of different uses that are allowed in the I-1 zone. Maybe it would be appropriate, and it's up to you guys to decide what you want to recommend, to wait to assign zoning until you have a development proposal and you consider the details of what that looks like and how it might, if it indeed does impact a neighboring property, what that impact might be and how to perhaps mitigate that and any of those kinds of things.
So the staff report does reference a potential power substation. It does say that in the staff report.
Yeah, we're working with the applicant and have been to try to secure that. And again, like I mentioned, I hope that's a non-issue, but also need to make it clear that today we cannot provide that
So
service.
the substation is
Oh,
not the proposed use on the land.
I
it's
see,
to
to
access.
Right,
get the
right.
power there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we don't know what they want to do with it. Okay.
I
The
think
zone
the applicant
change,
said
it would
they
have
were
to have a zone
entertaining
change
offers.
in order for the substation to go in, correct? No?
I know a municipal facility like that would be permitted in a number of different zones, but that's a good question too.
And that
Yeah,
substation's not
that's-
necessarily on this property either,
Okay.
right?
It doesn't necessarily need to be, although we've been talking with the applicant about potentially siting it on the
Oh, okay.
subject property also.
One issue that I am sensitive to is when people come and point fingers at the general city or the general city staff or the general city people that are representing the city and saying that the will is to gobble up land outside of Spanish Fork, and I take real issue with that. We honor property rights, property owners. So if you have an issue, your issue should be with the property for 90% of this transaction. It should be with the property owner, right? And so we honor property owners' rights, and we are trying to do what's best for the city, and I totally understand where you're coming from and your frustration, but I do not like pointing fingers about this big government that's trying to, take over everybody's lives. We're actually trying to facilitate the best use for property owners, and we very much respect your property, your rights as a property owner as well, and have all the goodwill that we very much would like for you as well.
Good points. Any other comments? I think we have a few options in front of us from what from our discussion here. We of course have our, we'd be the approving body for this, as I understand it, the way the recommendation is written, that we can approve or not. We can also, there are some options Shauna brought forth and Dave agreed with this. It could be appropriate to say we would want to table this until we saw what the development would be. And there's might even be a few other options besides that.
I do have a question on that. So if we table it, it would not affect, as far as the substation goes, you're still move forward with the planning on that?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah. At least that's our.
If we wait and said, we want to see what, usage plan for the property.
Your reason being because you wouldn't want to hold up any other properties in the area getting the power they may need?
Right.
Okay,
Because they've already been approved and they're moving forward.
good point.
Or even this one for future use.
Well, let me ask more broadly. If we tabled this, what potential effect or stoppage would that have? Would that affect anything in terms of any work that's being done right now? Beyond just the substation? Is that hard to answer? You know what I mean?
No, but it's most appropriate probably for the applicants to answer that. I'm trying to think from the city's perspective.
Yeah.
Having this tabled, first of all, I think we'd have some concern as staff with an indefinite continuance.
Mm-hmm.
I think the applicants have a right to eventually, sooner than later, in fact, be heard by the city council, and they are the ones that would make a decision on the zone change. If the commission's inclined to continue it, I think that would likely need to be maybe to get some additional information from the applicant or staff, probably in the short term, maybe within a meeting or two's time, a month or two's time.
Wouldn't it be when the applicant was ready? The next meeting after they're ready to make it?
Yeah, perhaps. If the expectation is for them to provide a development plan, yeah.
Yeah, if they're
it
ready
could be.
for their next step.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification there. I think that'd be appropriate.
What's the better choice, to turn it down and with a note that says we'd consider it again when there's a development application, or to continue it? Like, what's the consequences of both of those?
So, sorry, I want to clarify one thing. You are not the approving body.
Okay.
You are the recommending body.
That's what I.
The way I read the recommendation, it sounded like.
Yeah, it does read that way, but
Yeah.
we are just making a recommendation to the city council, either a negative recommendation or a positive recommendation, or that you are tabling it. Even in the tabling it, the applicant potentially has the right to move it forward at some point, based off whatever they've submitted to you. They don't have to provide any additional. They just want a decision from you to move forward to the city council. So, like Dave said, if you are tabling it, it would have to be for a very short period of time, likely, before they would be entitled to ask for a recommendation, either positive or negative, to the city council.
Thanks for clarifying that.
If we vote to not recommend it, does it still go to the city council?
Yes, certainly. Yeah. And I guess my thought on Commissioner Warnick's question really is I'd love to hear from the applicants and what they'd prefer. From the city's perspective, I don't think there's a big hurry. Sometimes.
Yeah, I'd like to hear
applicants-
from them, like what their plan is, how
Yeah.
far along they are, where they're, all that.
Nick Simpson. I'm with the developer group. And I just want to say, I've actually attended a branding on Eldon's property. I grew up in Palmyra with Eldon. One of his sons was one of my young men's leaders for many years. So I feel all of the sentimental value to this property and the properties around it. And Eldon, you had some false doctrine. We do live in Palmyra right now. So that's just a little side note for Eldon there. But we do live in Palmyra right now on a property while our home's being built in Lakeshore. So as far as the plans go for the 64 acres currently, the only plans that we've had so far is just with the city on the substation. We don't have any big development plans in motion. We've done some studies on the soils just to see what kind of use would work there, what kind of buildings. You obviously have the trucking facility just to the east of us, and then the airport, with their expansion. So I'm sure there's going to be some need for more light industrial storage facility, I don't know, type use, but we don't have anything set in stone. But light industrial, warehousing, buildings of that sort is kind of what we had envisioned. But we would be working with an actual builder. So we don't do the vertical construction. We do the horizontal site work construction. So we would take it to that phase, build out the pads, go through the city process, so the city would know exactly what the use would be by the time we're done with it. So any other questions?
Thank you.
Dave Simpson. I appreciate all of Eldon's comments. I've been in his position. I'm in my position now. It's not all about money. We have spent millions of dollars to purchase this ground, and we do have personal property rights. a comment that I make to an adjacent property owner if they don't like what I'm doing by my property. And my property's for sale right now if Eldon wants to buy it. I do have the right to come before you. We're asking for a zone change. And I think as a planning commission, we're in the process of spending more money to start a development, and we can't really start that development unless we have the proper zone in place. And so it's a double-edged sword. We can't really start down this road unless we have comments from you, and we will go to the council, not to step over you guys, but we do have rights, and we would like you to honor those rights, just like if Eldon wants to. I was thinking of something. An annexation is not the neighbors around me wanting my property annexed. An annexation is that I, the property owner, would like my property brought into the city. So annexations, there's another annexation that's happening, and it's all property owner driven, not the mean old city, not any other person than the property owner, because they have that right to come into Spanish Fork City. Nobody has, if they don't want it, they can protest it. If Eldon wants to keep running cows on his property, I won't say anything about that. But I just feel like Eldon shouldn't have the right to tell me what I'm going to do with my property. Unfortunately, it's not what he wants, but fortunately, it's what I want, and I have the right. Thank you.
So to address that, I think you're probably addressing that at me. So the comments I made where you had the right to be annexed in, you asked that, we approved that, the city did. Then you're now zoned RR. That's awesome. You have a property that you're now looking to change that, and you have the right to ask for that, but you don't have any expectation of receiving that unless the city, the council, and the commission, council ultimately, but through the Planning and Zoning Commission, says, yeah, we agree with that. And that, I support you in going for the highest, best use you have of the land for whatever you want to do with it. You own it now. You have those property rights. So I don't think there's any deviation on that. I don't want anything I said earlier to be misconstrued. I was saying anything other than that. Where my concern comes up is if there are uses, or if you're planning on doing or spending money, often we'll have developers come in here, not you guys in this case, we'll have developers come in who have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on site plans and soils reports, and maybe even going on their construction drawings before they've got their zoning in place. And they come in saying, we've already been down this road and we spent money. Hopefully you've not done that until you have it in place. It sounds like you're doing it in the right order. Because that is the interest you have in your land will be determined by what zoning you're able to get out of the city. So, Dave, did that answer your questions? Do you have other specific ones for the applicant, or?
No, that covered what I was.
So I think we have the same options we talked about earlier. I do really appreciate Dave's direction on there should be a timeline put on there if we went with that. I'm not advocating that at all. I was just bringing that up based on your comments. That I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. Do we have any more discussion to be had on it, or do we want to make a motion?
I'll state my preference. My preference would not be to hold up the process.
Okay.
I think we make a motion and then let them go to city council.
Yeah, I'll comment. I think that's also my preference as well. I don't know that we achieve anything here by holding up the process. We know what the applicant wants to do. It's in order. It's a change, but that's what happens here. It's a partnership between, that's what the owner's asking for. So I agree with that
clear
sentiment.
direction.
Yeah.
think it's good to get your feedback. That helps other commissioners know what you're thinking. And
It makes it tough because to do residential here it wouldn't fit. But that's what it's for now. And I don't know if I'm ready to make that change yet.
knowing everybody. Do you have more to say?
Yeah, I'm split here because I'd prefer to see a development application before approving the zone change, but then you were just saying how developers put in a lot of money before they do.
They haven't so much yet, so according to what they said. I don't want to speak for them. I was speaking for other developers who've done that.
Yeah.
And that's money they're at risk for based on what the city allows them to do.
Right.
But
I'd prefer to see a development application before feeling comfortable changing the zoning, but
So I get that, but so are we looking to see what they're putting there, and then we're going to decide we like what they're putting there or not? That's my whole thing. If we're going to,
I guess the thing is seeing what kind of impact it's going to be on the.
so
on the
for
neighbors.
you, it depends on what of the uses listed in the II zoning, depending on what was ended up, because they're gonna build it to suit for what others
Right,
have
yeah.
built. So depending on what they're bringing in, and there could be on 64 acres, you could have several. It could be a few things, or it could be one big warehouse development.
Right.
The concern I have, whether Dave mentioned that when it comes to having a plan in place before, we're asking that for residential areas. If there's if we're doing a planned urban development, so on and so forth. But in industrial areas, this isn't what we've done before. Whether that's the right process or not, that's what's happening right now. So I don't know if us changing that consistency would make any sense here, or would be appropriate. You get what I'm saying? Like, if others have already gone through this process that way, it's reasonable to expect that this is what happens, barring any sort of change we have in the municipal code or policy. So I'd maybe say that to counteract that, if that's what we're doing right now. And Dave, it sounds like that's what we are doing right now. This is much in line with what we're doing right now in terms of for industrial zone changes.
Yeah, and I believe that's where staff's coming from with our recommendation. But I'd reiterate, and maybe I didn't put it quite this way before, I think the Planning Commission, by way of what you want to recommend, you have all the latitude in the world on a matter like this. Legislative act, ultimately the city council can operate the same way with a lot of latitude.
I get that, but
we
is
have
it-
certainly set a precedence.
Yeah,
Right or wrong, the property to the east, when they asked for that to be rezoned and brought in, did they have a whole development plan, or what steps did they go through? What's the normal steps here? Would they have gone through, did they come the same way and ask, hey, we want to get rezoned to light industrial, we want to get in here, and then we decide what we put on the property?
I appreciate the question. I think I know where you're going, so I'm trying to think.
Right?
If
Because I don't want to reinvent the wheel here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a time when we've held up a proposed industrial zone change to wait for a development plan and nothing comes to mind. So I think most often in the past, we haven't had a specific development proposal before zoning's been changed to industrial 1.
Yeah, so is this the time to change that? Like you say, not wanting to reinvent the wheel, but do we have a compelling interest to change that? Do we have a compelling interest that something?
But if it's been working, and it benefits the landowner, lets them know.
But the other question that we always ask is, what do the neighbors, what's the impact to the neighbors, and how do they feel about it? That we always ask that question. So I think that's the other part of it, that we haven't heard this vigorous of an objection before.
We've heard it many times.
Have we? I'm just having a hard time remembering. Anyway, yeah.
Well, and it's a hard thing to say, though. If you want to control what happens with a property, you buy the property. That's an expensive thing to do. A cheaper way to do that is to come try to change policy, right? But then that encroaches on property rights. And I'll be honest, I have a hard time with encroaching on property rights.
Yeah.
I do.
So,
If you do, can you do it from the podium, please?
Yeah.
And I'm not opening this back up to, I'll let you comment, we're not opening this back up to comments after this.
I was just going to say to the planning of the site that we could present something now, but that could all change at city council. You know, so I mean we could present something, but yeah, we don't want to go down the road of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars doing that if we don't have the zone. And then, you know, if we get the zone and you don't like what we design, then turn that down and we redesign until you have a product that you like. So that's what I'll say to that.
I think that's what you were trying to state earlier, right? I'm not saying they hadn't done that yet. They would need to spend money to get that development for us, or to get the site plan for us.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Dave?
and I'm not anxious to chime in, but to be clear, once the zoning is assigned, you likely would not see any development proposals, anything specific on this, the site plan, that's handled administratively, just as an FYI, so.
As long as it stays in the zoning that they request. They don't
Spot
want
on.
another
Exactly, yep.
zone change.
I go both ways. I see both sides of it. It's just, do we want houses right there?
No.
Nobody's going to put houses there, so. I wish they owned it all and they could do what they wanted. Or they could get bought out and go do what they want somewhere else. You can't win here for us.
So really, by thinking aloud here, really by voting against it and saying I want to see a development application, it really is just kicking the can down the road because we're going to honor a property owner's rights.
yeah, and to me, it feels like kind of adding additional red tape, you know, that's eventually going to get resolved. I would assume would get resolved.
We have said before that we would like to see development applications, but
I don't know if
More
that's correct,
for-
though, Sean, what you just said previously. I mean, if you have that concern, Dave has said that you have the latitude to express those concerns and incorporate that into a motion if you feel that way. I mean, yeah, it might be right, but you still have, if that's a concern that you have and it's a legitimate concern, it can be brought up and considered, and it should be. We're all here to speak our mind on these topics, and
and boy,
you do it well.
I do. Or you're good at clarifying my thoughts.
And they are within the city's growth plan. And what
They're
the city's
annexed in the city.
Yeah.
plan is for that area. I mean, we're not asking for anything.
That's not planned.
It's consistent with what we're planning in
It's
that
very,
area.
yeah, it's consistent. It matches the other properties as they've been zoned in, so.
Right, okay.
Anybody want to take a stab at a motion?
I will.
Thank you.
I move that the proposed Swenson property zone map amendment be recommended for approval based on the findings number 1, 2, and 4, specifically striking number 3.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm opposed.
I'm opposed.
So 4-2. Okay. That will go before the city council. We've recommended it to go before city council. When, Dave?
Scheduled for a public hearing next week, Tuesday, the 9th.
Okay.
Did not expect that to take. And it's my fault, I know.
Also, we don't.
Our next topic is, I just covered up my agenda. Our next topic is the introduction of our land use element, land use element of the general plan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. We're going to offer up an unrehearsed duet talking about the land use element of the general plan, the draft that is the result of a number of months worth of work. And I'm going to ask Mr. Wagstaff to keep pace with us here. We're going to move pretty quick. Great start. Thanks. So to stop on this slide for a quick second, we're here tonight to present a handful of things about a proposed draft that would change the city's long-term vision for land use. Now, as I say that, and I might reiterate this, and Dave might as well as we go back and forth here, I think that as anybody gets familiar with this draft, they will recognize that the changes for the most part throughout the community are really not that significant. And it's that way because as we went through a lengthy public input process, we heard residents and other property owners from the community say they're very comfortable with less change instead of more. So that's something of a theme. Josh, I really appreciate the pace, but I'm gonna have to ask you to go back real quick. By way of the invitation, we ask that our residents, and this is not the easiest way necessarily to track down, the webpage that we've set up to provide an opportunity for people to get familiar with the document, some 60 or so pages, that is proposed at least to take the place of the city's current land use element of the general plan. The easiest way to find that, in my opinion, is to go to the city's website and in the search bar, just enter land use element. And this page will be the first thing that pops up. The link that I have there spelled out, that's the hard way for me to get to it, typing that in. And if anybody has any concerns or challenges with tracking this thing down, our office is the Community Development Office. We're on the second floor of the city office building. Our contact info's, I think, readily available on the website. We'd love to have anybody reach out to contact us. It's really our hope that, and again, people will take, it might take an hour to get familiar with the document. If you wanted to spend 15 minutes, however, you could get pretty familiar with the nuts and bolts, certainly the key points of what we're talking about tonight. And I'll say it one more time. That's our invitation. That's what this is all about. So that being said, I'm going to touch on a few more things before I hand things over to Dave. Again, a number of months ago, this is how the project was branded. Today's progress, tomorrow's pride. And we think that accurately reflects a lot of things about Spanish Fork and the future that we believe this document helps support in terms of continuing the type of progress that the community's enjoyed in the past, so that in the past people can be as happy with Spanish Fork as they are today. Maybe a couple more for me. By way of some housekeeping, communities in Utah, they have general plans. And today, when we talk about a general plan, we're really talking about the land use part of that. Can be other parts as well, and for us in Spanish Fork, there are other parts. This is language straight from the state code, talking about the purpose of a general plan, looking to the future to make sure needs are met, making sure that we're planning for growth and development and that type of a thing. Indeed, that's the foundation and fundamentals of what we're talking about. A little bit more specific, this is the next part of the same statute, talking about future uses of land and an official map. Most of the time when we talk about the general plan or the land use element, people immediately gravitate towards this map that has colors on it. And oftentimes people don't want to talk about anything else than that. And I get it. That's kind of the interesting, maybe easiest to digest part of what we're talking about, but there's more to it than that. So that being said, you want to take over for a little bit?
Sure.
Okay.
We wanted to organize this document so that not only would it meet those state requirements, but that it would be useful to the public, to elected officials, to staff, as well as educational. There's a lot of misconceptions about what this is and it's what it does for the city. But most importantly is that it's not set in stone. It's a living document that can be refined and updated as conditions change, needs are identified, infrastructure is built, and the greater region evolves. So there's a lot of things that this does to address some of those things. It's also a long-range vision about how Spanish Fork could develop over the next couple decades. It directs policy regarding zoning decisions or code changes. It is map-based, like Dave said, so it does have some geography to it about where things are located and how they relate to one another. It's also a tool for preserving community values. It can dictate where there are areas that we want to preserve and recognize as valuable assets to the community. And it is one part of the general plan. So it ties the land use to the transportation element, moderate income housing, any future utilities, infrastructure, parks, as well as a future station area plan that could be coming to the city in the next couple decades. One thing there are things that it is not. It is not zoning, so it doesn't dictate what someone can do on their property as of today. It's not a development approval, so it doesn't say just because the land use for your property is low-density residential doesn't mean that you can build a house a day. That is based on what the zoning is and following through with the process that I think you're definitely familiar with, and as you play a part in that. And it's not a build-out schedule, so we don't anticipate or promote growth in areas where it doesn't make sense or there isn't infrastructure. It's just an opportunity to look forward and find out what could be in the future and to plan accordingly. So there was an extensive community outreach process. Started with a focus group with 35 stakeholders to kind of lay the groundwork. An initial survey with over 3,000 respondents. There was a workshop where different opportunities and development patterns were presented and discussed amongst those that wanted to join and participate, and then a second survey that was also done. And the opportunity to provide feedback, give thoughts about people's properties specifically or the city as a whole has always been open to the public, and we've always welcomed an opportunity to gain that insight. And so we wanted to incorporate that insight. We wanted to make people understand that this is not just a direction from the city on how the city wants to develop. It's based on a lot of the feedback that we received. Talking about concerns about traffic, about density, where it's located, how intense it is. There's support for walkable, mixed-use areas and gateways and places where it makes sense to locate it, as well as investing and upgrading and improving the assets that the city community has, like Main Street, like the surrounding farmland. So we heard a lot about that throughout this process. So some of the comments that the public made were traffic's out of control, density, we don't want it along Highway 6. So we tried to address that in the plan. So you can go to the next slide. There are goals and policies that address those concerns. There are projects like the Center Street Interchange or Future Front Runner that we want to tie to how development happens over time. And then, like I said, there's a transportation element that gets into more of the details about traffic and how that relates to land use and development. We also heard a lot about housing, where it's located, how dense it is, the number of townhomes and apartments that have been built over the past few years, and preserving some of the larger lots that people tend to associate with Spanish Fork. So the plan attempted to address this as well by locating density where it makes sense and not spreading it citywide, defining what an established neighborhood is, and trying to discourage incompatible development in those areas, and promoting all different types of housing based on what the community needs and different types of families and residents that are here and that will come to the city in the future. And of course, we've heard a lot about preserving farmland and open space and maintaining a small town feel. It's not easily done, but there are tools in place like the growth management boundary, agriculture protection areas, goals that are outlined in the draft, addressing sensitive lands, places where development shouldn't go because of environmental issues or steep slopes, and also supporting infill improvements and development within the existing core of the city. So those are some of the things, and I'll be happy to hand it back over to Dave to go into some of the details that are in there.
So for the next couple of minutes, I'm just going to touch on some highlights that are intended to provide folks with a little glimpse into what they'll be reviewing. They look at the proposed draft. And I didn't mention this earlier now. I did in the work session earlier tonight, but I really appreciate Mr. Mann. He's done a lot of heavy lifting to get this document where it is, and I think he's done a great job of providing a product that's easy for the community to get their heads around. At least that's some of the initial feedback that we've heard, that we've consistently heard, and that was a primary goal for us, to develop something that would be put to use. Growth in context, there are a lot of different things that frame, big picture-wise, the outlook of growth and change in Spanish Fork, and there's some data in the document that I think helps us understand the need to plan and prepare for the future and to what extent things are likely to change in the future. It's one section of the document. And Mr. Wagstaff, strengthening and shaping. There is a concept that the consultants that have helped us with this, I think, did us a great service in sharing, and it's the idea that in areas that are largely developed or maybe completely built out, we need to recognize what we heard through the public outreach, which is that residents don't want to see those neighborhoods change. They want things to stay the same. So for the most part, that concept then has been wrapped in an idea of where there are established neighborhoods, make a deliberate effort to take steps to maintain a certain feeling in terms of a development pattern. We recognize that development might still happen on an adjacent field next to a neighborhood, but the plan does take care in making sure that development is compatible with adjacent neighborhoods. In areas where there are opportunities for redevelopment, the same concept applies, which to some extent, this is not new, but the plan reinforces the need to be sensitive to areas that are already developed and the community's desire to see those areas, maintain the qualities that they appreciate. Likewise, there are areas that are open today for development, areas that have access to infrastructure that for us as a society is oftentimes very expensive. Interchanges, access to freeways, other large pieces of infrastructure in the plan suggests that those are the areas where new types of development really should be focused. We know that growth is going to happen, and you got one ahead of me there, Josh, if you don't mind going back. Appreciate that. I do need to take a minute to talk about this. There are areas that are appropriate for growth, and there are areas where we want to be very sensitive to how things grow aside from the established neighborhoods. Cultivating growth is a section of the document that's intended to provide guidance in terms of how to manage growth and development in areas where there are other sensitive features that need to be protected. We have a couple of things in Spanish Fork that guide growth long-term, and what's one thing that guides our long-term growth in terms of the area that Spanish Fork is planning today to grow into. And we have another tool that identifies in a more immediate time frame where growth is anticipated to occur. If we present this document in the near future in a public hearing, we will present it so as to provide you with an opportunity to make a recommendation on the land use element. And separately, with a separate motion, to make a recommendation on a modified growth boundary. The growth boundary is the tool that Spanish Fork City has to say, these are the areas that we can serve perhaps in the next 5 years. And we anticipate changing that with this proposed draft. Frankly, the changes that we've contemplated so far are relatively minor. But that's one aspect of what we're talking about. And that's one of those two tools that we have that allows ultimately the city council to direct growth into certain areas on the short term. The other tool is our annexation policy plan, the map that we have on the lower left-hand side of that image there, which is just a page out of the draft document. It's, I realize, likely very hard for people maybe that are watching this at home to see, but there's an area in gray. That's the land that is within the city's current growth boundary. Those are areas that we think we're relatively ready to provide municipal services to now. Aside from that, there are other properties that are outside of that boundary that have the, I'm going to call it red shade to it, and that indicates properties that are within the annexation, that represents properties or identifies properties that are within the city's annexation policy plan, which is the long range anticipated boundary for Spanish Fork. Our annexation policy plan has not changed in a significant way for decades, and yet we have not come close yet to reaching the boundaries of that plan. So when I say long range, we are indeed thinking many decades out into the future with that. And yet it's important for us to have some sense of where we anticipate the community growing into, so we can plan for utility development and roads and different things like that. Green space, in terms of land use and quality of life, maintaining a robust green space network is essential. And this portion of the document identifies the things that Spanish Fork City considers to be the important parts of our green space network. City parks. A lot of times it's properties that are owned by our school district that are an important part of that, as are agricultural lands, sensitive lands that can't be developed. Different things like that comprise that network. And we're fortunate in Spanish Fork both to have currently a pretty comprehensive trail network. But in addition to that, we have plans for an even broader trail network to link, among other things, these different portions of our green space network. I'm going to just go real quick to talk about the first part of this and let you get into the designations. Does that work? And so I mentioned the map earlier, and I'm going to touch on one thing that Dave mentioned by way of what this is not. This is not a zoning map. When we talk about the zoning map, just in a nutshell, that is law. And earlier tonight, you had a conversation where the concept of property rights was discussed. Property rights are based on zoning. And again, this is not that. However, this is intended to be a guide that's used when decisions about zoning are made. This is an advisory image that becomes an important adopted document. This is one of the things that in the state statute, it's called out an official map. That's what currently we have as a land use map of the general plan. And this is the proposed updated version of that. You're aware that this has been vetted in multiple different public meetings that we've had, both with you as a commission and with you and the city council together. And I really appreciate the time and effort that you've put into this as the council. Again, as I mentioned earlier, for the community, I think this is a really important part of the land use element. And as much as anything, it really does paint a picture of what the future vision for the community is. Now, each of those different colors that we have on this map, this image, they represent different land uses. And I think Dave's done a great job with the draft document that we have of providing people with a good description of what those different colors mean. And you can see when we get into some of the imagery that we have, that's just excerpts from the document in terms of pages. There's a color key that runs throughout the document that's intended to make it easy to reference what these are and so forth. And with that, Dave, I'll let you take it from there.
So everything that we've talked about so far leads us to make these proposed decisions on where land uses make sense and where they fit with how the city might grow over time. Go ahead and move to the first we've got, we also included some data about the proposal and what it might mean if this plan didn't change, if it was followed through over time. It breaks down how land is, the composition of the different land uses throughout the city, how it breaks down with a large portion being industrial and a lot of minor portions being in the higher density residential zones. So we wanted to include that to kind of give a reference about how it's reflected on a citywide scale. Environmentally sensitive areas is a new designation that was created to identify those places that typically would have an agricultural designation. That cities will often just label those agricultural, even though there is a distinction between a place where you can have a working farm or agricultural practices and places where there are environmental restraints about what can be done there. So we wanted to make sure that those were distinct from agricultural areas. As you can see from the different pages, there's a color code, there are maps and reference images to kind of paint a picture of what these land uses are so that they can be referenced when considering zoning proposals or changes to the land use map over time. So we've listed some of the different types of densities that are in residential zones: estate, low, medium, high, with different ranges for density as well as different types of housing options that that we would consider would make sense in those different designated areas. Gateway is another area that was new to the decision based on feedback that we received from the community, from elected officials about where density is located, to concentrate it where it makes sense, where there's good access, and where it's not going to impact those established neighborhoods that we talked about earlier. Mixed use is kind of a lower scale, often represented by Main Street and kind of the older area of the city, where you do have some existing businesses that are right up against residential that you typically don't see in a lot of suburban areas. So there's opportunities for those to be preserved, to be maintained over time, and potentially be added to with infill types of development. Then we've got commercial and business park, some of the common land uses that were part of the original land use map with the last land use element. We also, if you go to the next slide, we wanted to identify where public facilities are, so we can see where schools are located, parks, different infrastructure, utilities, and where they relate with regard to the city as a whole. We also wanted to reference the station area and how that is another component that will come in the future as those decisions are made and that plan is developed more as the timeline for when transit could come to our community and how it should be developed around to be able to make best use of that asset.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up here with a really brief overview of part of the document that's really, really important. Much of the document is highly visual And again, I give Mr. Mann credit for making that happen. This is largely words. So I'll go high level here, but again, with an invitation that somebody take time to read the less than 20 pages in the document, maybe just a little bit more than 20, that are devoted to a structure of goal, objective, and strategy that really identify what the community's plans are with some narrative that provides some explicit direction that you don't get from a map. And there are 9 kind of subject headings that the goals match. They're spelled out there. I won't read them. This is a really important part of the document, and we've had several discussions with the commission and council members about this. And I'll just say that in terms of how we operate day in and day out as community development staff, we take this as our direction from ultimately the city council in terms of how they want us to operate and how they want us maybe to advise people on what to pursue and how to go about that and that type of a thing. And at least for now, I'll just leave it at that with the invitation that people go to the city's website, get familiar with the document. We're really hoping to get some feedback and some guidance on the draft at this kind of final stage of the project. And we really appreciate what Dave pointed out, which is that we've had more than 3,500 individual responses to different pieces of this project as it's been developed and as it has evolved. And that is a strength that I think will give this some lasting power, which is really important. We want ultimately the city council to feel ownership for something that will have some longevity. So that's really how it influences a certain direction. The last thing I'll say, though, and I'll go back again to one of the earlier slides that Mr. Mann spoke to, that we talked about in your work session. This is a living document, nonetheless. And Spanish Fork City, I think, has a very good track record of entertaining proposed changes to the general plan and taking them at face value. Not every proposed change that's been made to the general plan in the last couple of decades has been approved, but certainly our current general plan, that it was last overhauled in 2011. So we're pushing 15 years now with that document, which it seems like a long time, and it is. But yet, there have been 3 relatively significant updates made to that document before we got to this point where there was the type of community outreach that happened and kind of, more of a from the ground up redo of things. And we'd expect that to happen with this draft as well, that it will be revisited on a particular schedule. And in some ways, we really hope to define a schedule. I talked about the growth boundary earlier. One of the things that we've discussed with the city council that I think it's an idea that's taking root is that growth boundary part of this document, that get reevaluated perhaps on an annual basis, maybe every other year. But that we lay forth a plan for that to be updated so as to give the city, it's a city council ultimately, an opportunity to play a proactive role in saying, this is where we think it's appropriate for growth to occur today. And then likewise, if you're not in the growth boundary, you can anticipate perhaps a proposed zone change that's outside of the growth boundary to not be received well within a certain time frame and that sort of a thing. So a little bit more about how we anticipate this document working for the community. Appreciate your time tonight and letting us share this, not just with you, but with anybody that is tuning in, live or otherwise. It's been a project that's taken a while. There have been a lot of hands involved. And at this point, I understand that there still will be adjustments made before it's adopted and put into play. Frankly, I think we're down to fine tuning. That's my opinion. And we're really excited to be at this point. I'm really pleased with the document and how it represents what we think we heard from the community.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks to the staff. As I read through that document, we've been involved with it for a long time now. I am way happy with the way that's been put together. As I look at what other communities have and how it's presented, this person that's not familiar with it can just start reading through it and have a very good understanding of what the city's goals, the council's directions, and how we approach things, and the reasons for it, just from this document. And a lot of it's in the presentation, the thought that went into it. Small things like showing the zoning type and where that zone type is in the city on a map next to it makes it a really user-friendly document. And there's a lot of instances like that through the whole thing, and I think the staff has done an excellent job on it. And really appreciate that. We did want to get, I think some of the commissioners had some comments they wanted to make on it. Dave has, like we talked about forward, the staff has opened it up. We can go and talk to them, but if you have things you want to just put out there, we're welcome to hear those comments now.
Anyone else besides me and my 2-page document? Okay, I just have after reading through, I just am so excited about this. Thank you again for all the work and extensive expertise that's gone into this. Wow, it's been awesome. And I love that you've posted this again, put it out on social media, sent it out for more public input. It's important. Even if this plan, the map, has not changed extensively, I think, just like it has been said, that it's great to periodically review the land use element. I think that's awesome. As I was working through the document, I was also looking at the other parts of the general plan that are referred to in the digital document. It's page 9 of the digital document, but it's a different page at the bottom of the page. But on the city website, and I came across the CPAT Historic Downtown Revitalization report, as well as the updated Main Street study from 2019, which refers to the report ahead of time. And I was really happy to be reminded of those, and I would love in the future, as this document grows or changes as adapted, I'd love to have a section in there that's specifically dedicated, like one of our goals, to historic preservation. Although I do have to say I really appreciate that that historic preservation is referred to in several places in the goals and in throughout the land use element. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'd love a periodic report to see the progress on those recommendations that on the Main Street project plan. Also, looking at the residential growth map. Oh no, that's not something I meant to say. So if you go to page 11, which is digitally page 16, that growth boundary and policy boundary, one thing I would love to see, yes, that one right there, I'd love to see where the city's current city boundary is as an overlay on that. I'm not sure that that should go in that long-term document because the city boundary changes fairly regularly, but it'd be interesting just to, I mean, I'm not sure it's something anybody could do right now, but it'd be interesting to see where our city boundary is, where the growth boundary is, where the policy boundary is, just out of growth. Curiosity, not growth. I appreciate seeing that there's a growth statement right there at the beginning, and that we want to, that we cultivate our growth rooted in our stewardship, and yes, period. I appreciate that we have a balance of density development in the city. Thank you for those good charts on seeing that, especially at the build out. On the pages describing, you brought this up, describing the different designations. I love that you have clear visibility on the maps and example photos of what those look like. I thought that was really great. The high and urban density residential and the gateway photos remind me that landscaping, including big trees, I like that that's part of our city code, because boy, when you've got big buildings like that, even in the right part of the city, that landscaping and big trees need to be installed as soon as possible to soften that into what looks like a nice community as soon as they can. So on the public facilities photos, I appreciate that you included a photo of utilities. We don't often think of those things in our city until, and the great support they are to us, until we have a big storm or something goes wrong. So thank you for reminding us that that's part of our public facilities and all the different kinds of things that support our community. In the station area plan, I really appreciate that it's a great explanation of what it is, and appreciate the purposeful and sensible phased implementation on something dense and different as a station area plan. But one thing is the pictures of what those buildings could look like. I hope that the building elevations develop with more character than what's depicted there. They look like cold cement federal buildings to me, but I know that in future times when those buildings are come to pass, that we'll have better elevations than what the photos are of what could be in a station area plan. I love that your goal number 1 is to start with an orderly, efficient, and fiscally responsible development, like that you have strategies that reflect that and addresses issues that people often bring up and our misconceptions about how we develop in our community. I have a question specifically about 4.2.2, and that is that talking about Main Street? Also about, and is that related to 5.4 reinvestment and development strategies? I think both of those things, and you don't have to address that right this minute. These are just kind of my comments and questions, but as I was looking for Main Street and reinvestment and redevelopment strategies, that's one of the things I was wondering about. Goal number 6, industrial development. So this actually addresses something that we very much talked about tonight. And my thoughts about this was that industrial development is not sexy or particularly popular have a great reputation with regular citizens, or neighbors. But the goal describes the vital role of industrial development to a vibrant city. Thank you. It's nice that that's articulated. Goal number 7 is about agriculture, and I love the goal and the strategies. I love that Spanish Fork's heritage and commitment to agriculture is spoken about many times in this document. So thank you. 8 is about transportation, and citizens talk to me the most about transportation. What about you, commissioners? Do people talk to you most about transportation? I guess that and
They're scared to drive down Main Street. Is that what you're getting at?
Main Street, Highway 6, just all over. And so just last night at a party, a neighbor told me that he was looking through this document. Like, he saw it posted on social media, and he's an old retired professor, and I said, well, what did you think? And he said, I really want the trail to be connected between Mapleton and Spanish Fork. And I said, anyway, we had a conversation about that. And then, so these transportation strategies are really good, and I appreciate that they're also well articulated. I appreciate that sensitive lands are addressed in a thoughtful and practical way. I think that it really represents our heritage here in Utah and in Spanish Fork, where we use our lands and we're good stewards of our lands and we're practical about it. So there's all my comments besides another thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Can't follow that.
Yes, Dave.
can I follow up with Commissioner Warnock just on a couple of things? First of all, Shauna, thank you. You were kind of hard to keep up with there, but I think I got
I've got it. I can send you my
main-
document.
I'd appreciate that. But there was one thing that I caught that I think clearly was a question that I can provide a little bit of insight on now. Goal 4.2.2, if I had that one right.
Yes.
So we are in the process, and it just happens to be that the timing such that we're doing something right now that aligns with that goal. Spanish Fork City has hired a consultant to do a survey to identify buildings that have certain historic attributes to them in what largely we call the original plats of the city, which are the square blocks for the most part. And if they find that there is a large enough percentage of buildings that have a certain kind of historic integrity to them still, haven't been, facelifted, added on, roof lines changed, different things like that, to the point to where they lose significant historic character, then what's identified there, that historic district, can be created through the State Office of Historic Preservation, and that affords property owners that have buildings in the historic district opportunities to participate in some programs that ultimately award them with tax credits if they make improvements to their buildings that follow certain guidelines. In my opinion, it's a big deal. Our home in Provo, we've gone through that process twice with the State Office of Historic Preservation. Our home's in an historic district there and have benefited to the tune of many thousands of dollars in tax credits by following a program and making improvements to our home in a certain way. So we're excited to be able to bring that on board. And there was a follow-up that you had, goal 5, that I missed.
5.4.
Dave, on that one though, before you move on to that, does placing homes is that optional for the homeowners to enter into that? Or they just be in a historical district, but then they have the right to put their home into a historical property? Because that also hinders what you can do with your property if it's designated historical. How does that work for the individual owner?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you asked that. I think it's a really broadly accepted misnomer that having a property in a historic district causes you to fall under certain requirements or to limit you by way of what you can do with your building. It doesn't. We're not talking about putting a building on the historic register, for example. It's just having properties in a district where you, if you choose to, can qualify to participate in programs that have certain advantages. But if somebody wants to tear down a building in an historic district, there's no process that anybody has to go through to get special permission to do that. If you want to make an addition, anything like that at all, there aren't any different limits on that than what would exist anyplace else in the world. But yet there are opportunities that exist. So,
okay, great, thank you.
Shauna, you said 5.4.
Yes.
Point.
I just was looking at 5.4 in.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Section. Maybe go. What's the goal for 5. The objective? Investment and redevelopment in existing commercial areas.
That's one that I would really take at face value with how it's written. Making sure that we have the necessary infrastructure and frankly for us, I think as much as anything, it's having some zoning mechanisms that give people opportunities to adapt existing buildings for new uses and that sort of a thing, which is our development enhancement overlay, for example. It's really difficult with properties that have existing structures on them to either justify the cost that's associated with replacing those structures or adapting them in such a way that conforms to all of our rigid zoning regulations. So that's an important part, I think, of encouraging reinvestment and redevelopment in existing commercial areas. So I wouldn't align that entirely with the historic district kind of an approach, but I think they also work for a similar end, which is to try to encourage reinvestment in the older parts of the community.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. Anyway, those were a couple that I did catch from Commissioner Warnick, so thanks.
I want to make a couple very brief just comments, highlights, and these are in many ways echoing things, and I'll be real quick. I like, we mentioned a couple times, this document's not perfect, and that's okay. I think it's more of like a mission statement than anything else, and I appreciate that sort of ethos of it being a mission statement. And in so being, it's kind of a living document. I like that sort of approach. One thing you said, Dave, that I thought was interesting is perhaps looking at the more regularly updating the growth plan and annual basis, semi-annual, something like that, whatever it is. I like that idea. And I really like the idea that it sort of captures what we have. I think that gives kind of the value of kind of the legacy here, and without a lot of changes. I'll make one comment. I think the station area plan, which I know is still being developed, is pretty bold. It is quite different from what we've seen. It presents an opportunity for that. And one thing, Shauna, that you said that I'd really like to echo is, public utilities. We don't really think about them until they don't work, but they are so critical. I think they'll probably continue to go unnoticed, which is fine as long as they're working. Yes. If nobody's talking about it, they're working, right? And then just my final thing is, to whoever watches this or whoever can encourage this public input, I think helps. I think, within Planning Commission, the City Council, staff, everything, we have kind of a view of things, and having just fresh input from everyone who has perspective, who lives here. This is kind of the time to sort of dive in and give your feedback. So I would encourage that. That's it. So.
Okay. We'll move on to our next top item for the night. This is a public hearing, presentation from the staff on our general plan amendment, a proposed general plan amendment.
Hello, I'm excited to present this to you today. This is, we're proposing to include this element into the general plan. This would be a water use and preservation element. The state recently required every city to incorporate this element into their general plan. So as part of that, our water department partnered with the consultant Hansen Allen Luce to put together this element to include into our general plan. So I guess the short is this document is the goals and policies to reduce water use and water waste in the city. That's kind of the broad overview of it, but it shows what our historic and future water use will be, or is and will be, and it shows what existing policies we already have in the city to encourage development on reducing water use. And then it also talks about a lot of projects we've recently completed or future projects we have on the books to help with reducing water waste and water use. So I'll just hurry and read kind of what the state put out when they required this. It says, the general purpose of Utah's water use and preservation element is to integrate water considerations into land use planning to ensure development is sustainable and doesn't outstrip water resources. It requires municipalities and counties to assess the impact of development on water demand and infrastructure, and to identify strategies for reducing per capita water consumption in both existing and future development. This element aims to promote water conservation and encourage more thoughtful, water-conscious planning for the state's future. So that's what we aim to do. as the water department already has a water conservation plan that we do with our master plan, so this goes hand in hand with that. And the other thing with this is as we update that every 4-ish years, this element will also be updated. So kind of like the land use element, this is a document that will be updated and change as our strategies and new goals come about. So any questions? Okay.
I've said too much, but this is super interesting too. I really enjoyed going through it and
There's
seeing.
some, very interesting stuff in it, so. Okay, I'll stay close in case there's questions.
This is a public hearing. I'll open this up to the public if anybody wants to comment on this, the water use plan that will be attached to this general plan.
Hello, my name's Jackie Larson. I hurry up and wrote down my comments to it. So my family farms here in town, and we irrigate with shares from the Spanish Forks South Irrigation Company and Strawberry Project Water, and our land depends on the Benjamin Drainage District to keep the grounds workable. So to be honest, I just skipped ahead to where it says agriculture, so on 2.4 and 2.5, where it contains assumptions that are not accurate and that directly affect our legal ability to continue flood irrigating and to maintain the drainage system that make the agriculture possible in this valley. So first, the plan suggests that as development occurs, the historical irrigation ditches will likely be abandoned and that farms will simply be switched to the pressurized irrigation system with sprinklers or drip. But that's just simply not how irrigation works here. So Spanish Forks South Irrigation is not a city utility. It's a private irrigation company with adjudicated water rights and its own delivery system. Neither developers nor the city can decide that ditch delivery or flood irrigation is temporary. Our right to receive water through the existing head gates and ditches is part of our property rights, and it cannot be replaced or altered without the approval of the irrigation company and the water user. Second, the plan does not recognize the role of Benjamin Drainage District or any of the drainage districts. Flood irrigation and drainage have always worked together. The drainage tiles and open channels protect farmland from groundwater rise and keep soils farmable. So ignoring the system increases the risk of waterlogging, alkali, crop loss, and long-term soil damage. So the city cannot plan for water without acknowledging the drainage district that keeps the area functioning. Third, the plan treats agriculture as a temporary use. That's simply not true. And under Utah law and on agricultural protected areas, agriculture is recognized as a long-term primary land use. Our water rights, ditch easements, and drainage easements do not disappear just because development is happening nearby. Last, our flood irrigation is not comparable to municipal landscaping. Agriculture flood irrigation produces return flows, groundwater recharge, and downstream reuse. It's part of our valley's hydrology and cannot be categorized the same way as turf grass watering and subdivisions. So essentially what I'm asking is that the city remove the assumption that ditches will be abandoned and that farms must convert to pressurized irrigation, acknowledge the legal authority and engineering requirements of the irrigation companies and the drainage districts, affirm that active farms retain the right to continue flood irrigating, correct the statement that agriculture is temporary, and then commit to coordinating with irrigation companies, drainage districts, and ag protection area boards before approving development or land use changes. And just last, our irrigation systems and our flood delivery ditches and our drainage networks are not optional and they're not temporary. They are the very background of agriculture in this valley, and they deserve to be accurately represented in this element of the larger plan. So, thanks.
Thank you. Do you want to address any of those concerns or
I think
points?
a lot of those concerns as development comes through are pretty valid. As far as this water use preservation element of our general plan, this is talking more the city's system, right? Our irrigation system or our PI system. This particular section talks about agricultural, as a lot of the farm land, particular parcels develop. A lot of them have private ditches that do go away. If it's a main ditch, yeah, it stays active, and they work with the irrigation company to work that out. But So a lot of ditches do go away as development happens on certain parcels, but a lot of this section, what we kept in, it actually shows some good examples. There's a graph that shows our water usage on agricultural, and this is through the city system. And it's a good example of preserving water through, there's a couple areas where as developments happen to some of these fields, instead of spending a lot of money piping main irrigation ditches or something, we've been able to put those larger fields on our PI system, our irrigation system. And so right here, you can see in the last couple of years, it actually shows more water usage as agricultural, but that's because we're taking them off of ditches and putting them on our system. And as they go to that drip system or that sprinkler system, they're actually preserving water as they irrigate their fields. And so this water usage, when it's talking about agriculture, this is for our system, our PI system, our city system. So that's kind of what we're really referencing. The irrigation companies are their own utility and company, and yeah, we don't have anything to do with what they do with their water. So.
I had the great privilege of serving on this commission with John Mendenhall for years and years, and every time we had any zoning issue come up that touched a drainage or a ditch or anything, he knew it backwards and forwards and made sure we preserved all of that, and we're aware of it in every detail.
Yeah, we try to be aware where those ditches are, and we always try to get them in contact with the irrigation company or the drainage district anytime they're looking to develop in those areas. But
on this graph that you're showing, so that is showing that you've increased city irrigation water going to agricultural purposes. Is that because they have been cut off from a ditch? Is it because the landowner has requested it? What's the purposes
one
of it?
particular, I forget the name of the development. It's right on 3400 East, kind of on the south and right before you drop off into the river bottoms. But that High Sky is what it is, I think. And so in order to still supply irrigation water to the field, there's still a field that's farmed right there. They would have had to spend quite a bit of money to pipe that main ditch to get there. And so we worked with the farm owner and the developer to get them a 4-inch PI service off of our pressure irrigation and get some of the water rights into our pressure irrigation system to help water their field. So they use sprinklers now instead of flood irrigating. So they actually save a lot of water in their usage. But it's now delivered through our pressure irrigation system, not flood irrigating. So that's kind of what that really talks about and is trying to show.
So this is what happens as agricultural land owners choose to be part of the
they're
city's
willing to,
water.
work with us to service off of pressure irrigation. We work with them to use their water rights and get it in our system and deliver it that way. So, yeah, it's happened in that field. There's one other development we were able to help, and that's recent, and so that's why you kind of see a spike in that irrigation usage for agriculture.
So it is interesting. So when you talk about actually conserving water through us delivering agricultural water, yes, I mean the city, there's not actually, the offset is to total water consumption. It could be coming from any other company, from the canal companies or something like that. Does the state track that in terms, I noticed in here there weren't actual numbers in terms of what sort of reduction we had on those, and I understand they're separate entities. Does the state sort of track that? Is there some sort of accounting of that? It might not be within our purview, but I don't know if we're aware of that.
We mentioned those percentages that are from other studies. I don't know. That's a good question. I imagine they look at how many shares they've had delivered in the past through the ditch, and then we get our numbers off the meter, right? Now that it's metered, we can read exactly what they're getting, but through the ditch, it's not always accurate. It's flood irrigating. It's
right. Different systems and different things like that. There was one question I had unrelated to agriculture, general consumption. Page 8, I think you have a graph that shows future water demand estimates, and we have somewhere around 2045, it looks like, that that we're going to start exceeding that projected demand. I know the statement said future conservation is going to be there. I don't know if we have any comments on what that might be. It's not too far out. I hope to be alive then, and I probably will be.
Yeah, so as our population grows, it becomes a little more important to start per capita conserving, but then also a little down in the document we talk about other projects where there's other supplies where we can also gain supply there,
so
other sources, I guess. So
additional work would need to be done, and again, these are just projections, but it's an interesting graph because that's
yeah,
it's close, it seems. And water is a huge concern everywhere, right? So
yeah, it is. Definitely.
What is being asked of the commission for this? Are we?
Recommended this addition to the general plan to the city council for approval, a recommendation based off that. So state code wants it done by the end of the year. So if
your
you could
timing is
recommend either approval or not approval, or amendments. If you want to recommend specific amendments, you can do that, but some type of recommendation to the city council.
Okay. Thank you. I guess I should close the public hearing if there's anybody else that has any other comments. If not, we'll close the public hearing. And then, commissioners, that's pretty straightforward. Do I have a motion?
I don't know if we need, I can see how Mrs. Larson could have taken could see in 2.4 could misinterpret what the intent there is. I know that we've clarified that the intent is when an area of farmland chooses to develop and become part of the city's water system, or however that goes, is there a need to
I don't think there's a need to, because they're already bound by the canal companies.
yeah, in a way, it feels like it's a different utility, right?
It's not
They
talking
own the
about
ditches and that, the city can't.
Right.
And it's been, we're
it
closed.
says
No, we
in
are
there-
closed for public hearing.
Okay. Can I clarify what
No.
the question is?
No, we're
Okay.
closed. So if we can, this is a part to be put onto our general plan. We're not stating a rule. This is our guidelines going forward. I don't see there's a reason to, I agree with Dave on those comments. Any other comments?
Nope.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept this document as presented to add to the general plan.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. That passed. Will go before the city council. I think our next motion is to adjourn. Our next item is to adjourn. Do I have any?
So moved.
So moved we adjourn. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.